Sports Talk Chicago. Here with Jon Zaghloul, and we are back and ready for today's special guest. He's a host on Fox Sports Radio, the founder of SwollenDome.com, and the host of the I Want Your Flex podcast. Please welcome Mike Harmon to the program. Mike, it's great to have you on. How are you?
Well, it means another cycle has come, and it's been a year as everybody has had the highs, lows, and living vicariously through the sports on the field. So we at least have that victory for us.
So, Mike, what's your take on the Bears' first preseason game?
It's a first preseason game. I don't get too high. I don't get too low. Try to be the voice of reason on our show on Fox Sports Radio, fighting Jason Smith. And sometimes LeVar Arrington and I go at it on our Sunday show. But it's the idea that you try to take little glimpses and see if you can pull a few positives. Because let's face it, and anytime you start getting amped up too much, you've set yourself up for great disappointment. You know what? As I get older, I try not to do that, right? Let's temper expectations and then be pleasantly surprised. But, you have to like some of the things you saw. And certainly Justin Fields was the headliner and making national news and obviously dominating the airwaves there in Chicago. But, when I look at it overall, there's the big question for me that isn't going to be solved or answered in any preseason game is, are there going to be five guys that can line up and keep him upright? Because the last thing I want is the Bears to unveil some new color scheme or alternate jersey next year, and for all of us to be looking at Justin Fields' knee or ankle like we did Joe Burrow with the Cincinnati Bengals, where he played behind one of the worst offensive lines ever assembled, ran for his life, and paid the price. So, it's all about being practical, pragmatic, and recognizing where there's going to be an obvious question mark on your roster.
Should he start game one if the O-line is still in this position?
I'm not starting him against the Rams in that defensive front. I mean, look, I'm not there at practice, so if you just tell me he's otherworldly with every throw, whatever. But, let's be frank. The throw to Jesse James, other than showing a little bit of arm strength and, yes, accuracy, so it looked like a giant bullseye on the field, that wasn't into a tight window. That wasn't a big-time throw. Jesse James caught the ball and backed in like, yeah, he could have moonwalked in or whatever dance you want to do. It was like there was no pressure point on that throw. The run, impressive. Field vision, all of that stuff is great. But to me, you paid QB1, right, all the Instagram posts or whatever, Andy Dalton a bunch of money to come in. We know what he is. And you've got a tough opponent out of the gate. I'm still of the old school of I want to see the guy, grow into a role and know that when you hand the keys over, it's ready to go. And I think what we have right now is, our microwave society. And some teams have set it up to where there is no competition. For all that, you look at the fun and excitement of Trevor Lawrence or with Gardner Minshew still there, we know Trevor Lawrence is going to be the guy. When you go to the Jets, they don't have anybody. It's Zach Wilson's time. Here, you went and paid a veteran to come in. So, you can slow the clock and see what you have to start the season.
Mike, when Bears Twitter hears this interview, they're going to come after you. Are you okay with that?
That's fine. That's right. It wouldn't be the first time someone's come after me. It won't be the last. On a nightly basis, if I showed you what the comments were in my Twitter feed and messages and everything, yeah, I get called every name in the book. I know everybody wants the shiny new toy right now. I'm telling you, it doesn't have to be that way.
Mike Harmon, you're on Sports Talk Chicago. Mike, what's Justin Fields' ceiling, though? How far do you think he could go in the NFL?
If this is done right, and again, I need all the component parts there as an individual athlete. I mean, it's all there. The ceiling is, it's the old proverbial through the roof. It's just a matter of, do you have all the complementary pieces? I think they're in a little better shape in the skill positions than I think most, assuming that you get Cohen back to complement Montgomery, and you got Damian Williams is interesting receiver position. I've been stumping for Darnell Mooney a bunch when it comes to the fantasy side of things, the other part of the gig that we do with all this, the I Watch Your Flex podcast and all that fun stuff. But, he's no longer a secret. I think folks are figuring out. And he's a guy that'll obviously win big once Justin Fields is there. But I think Fields is a guy that, could be one of those top 5 guys in this league. But it's like everything. It's like it has its time and its space.
Are you concerned about Matt Nagy developing him?
Honestly, yeah. I mean, we talked about it last year and a lot with how the offense was run and decisions that were made. I mean, look how explosive that offense was down the stretch. Why did the scheme have to change then? Why wasn't there a recognition of how Trubisky could run an offense to start a season? And that's not to, go and build a shrine to him. It's just, it was obvious that, getting him out on the move. And we see this with a lot of the younger quarterbacks, right? From 7-on-7s and the drills that you do now. A lot of the guys that are throwing on the run and making plays, and I know there's been a lot of spotlight on, a few from Justin during this process. It's like that's part of the DNA of the quarterbacks of this generation. But we saw that with Trubisky last year, and they're moving the ball, they're scoring points. Like the Nick Foles experiment was a disaster when they inserted him into the lineup. And you can't tell me anything else. So, anytime there's the exaltation, and I see it a lot in the national guys because they like Matt Nagy, I take exception. I raise my hand and say, hold on a second. So, yeah, there's a modicum of reservation, but sometimes the talent is just going to break through.
How safe do you think his job is moving forward? What needs to happen this year and in the years to come for him to stay with the Bears?
They need a better, more secure playoff run. They got in with the extra slot last year, obviously. To me, though, that's the other part is to see the curiosity of the psychology of it all, right? Because if you start Justin Fields and things don't go right off the jump, you don't have that get out of jail free card of, hey, we brought the rookie in midway through the season, and it's going to take some time. And so for him and for the front office, certainly, that's the old card you get to play, right? Of, well, we've got this guy, he's at the ready, you got to let us develop him kind of situation. Now we've seen so many other teams haven't, done that, and they'll still put the hook on the coach. But as we know, the Bears usually let it go a little bit longer. So, but I think they have to win, right? Last year, you had some attrition on defense and some issues that didn't let you hit, max on both sides of the ball. But I think the expectations have to be big for this year.
If they start Fields right away or in the first couple of weeks, do you see a playoff appearance for the Bears?
Well, tough schedule out of the jump, right? So, you got to do it. I think they're a playoff team, provided they can stay healthy, and that's regardless of Dalton or Fields at the QB. I think with Fields, obviously, there's a little different element in terms of the verticality you can get into over Dalton and the plays with his legs, etc. But I still go back to the offensive line. I don't know if they're expecting the arrival of Jason Peters to solve everything. That's the one part of this team. It all begins and ends with that front five and defensively, your alignment, and everything builds from there. And that's the one concern that I have. But certainly in the division, Minnesota's got some great talent, but obviously the specter over Kirk Cousins potentially missing time if something enters the building is there. You look at the Detroit Lions and Dan Campbell. While he's a fun, entertaining listen, and I love the coaching staff he's assembled, I don't think personnel-wise they're ready. Green Bay, team to beat. And then you look at the NFC overall, I think they should be they should be in the playoff mix and find their way in. But as we know, one or two injuries, and especially that offensive line, I hate to harp on it, and people are gonna be like, "He said that already." I'm like, yes, because it's that important. It's that important. I don't care how good Justin Fields is. Any quarterback either throwing from his backside or running for his life on every down is not a formula for winning.
And we saw that last year with Foles and Trubisky, to the point where both guys who weren't super mobile had to run away so much, and nothing materialized.
Right. No, that's just it. So, but that goes back to the adaptability, right? And that was the thing with Mitchell towards the end of the season. It was, okay, we're going to design it to where you're already on the move, right? So that we can make something happen, as opposed to just leaving you between the tackles and hoping and wishing and praying. So I think the importance of adaptability. But the worst thing you could do is come into a season saying, all right, we have to game plan for that game one because we know we don't have an offensive line that stands up. And unfortunately, I think that's where they're at right now.
Before we go to baseball, Mike, I wanted to ask you, are there any other national NFL headlines that you wanted to talk about or plug before we shift to a new topic? I know we talked a bit off the air. I want to give you the floor.
Oh, no. I mean, look, it all flows back to the same reservoir, right? You've got hot take nonsense of the hatred of Tim Tebow, who got cut by the Jaguars. Look, I saw some of the, one-liners folks were throwing out there, and guys are embarrassing themselves. It's like, guy got a shot, guy got cut, game over. Okay, that's it. Everybody needs someone to be their champion in any field in this world. And whenever a guy who you've given so much to, like a career for Urban Meyer, came off of the back of a lot of the greatness of Tim Tebow, you let him hang in camp a little bit, and then when it's time, he goes away, and that's it. End of story, right? Everybody else got a job through a friend, got a referral, got a lateral shift because someone knew somebody, or you were buddies, golfing buddies or whatever. I mean, look in the mirror. There's parts of your life that weren't all merit based. So all those folks can beat it. The rest of it, I think there's so much of the air was taken out of the room with the Aaron Rodgers stuff. He ended up doing exactly what I said he would. So I took a little victory lap over my partner Jason Smith on that one. And we'll continue to fight, I think, all season long on that. And then it's troubling that you have the situation in Houston that really doesn't seem to be an end to, and there's not a lot of clarity, and the indecisiveness of the NFL puts it back in the crosshairs of folks that want to talk about how much they care or don't for people outside the league. So that one's a bit troubling, not just for the headlines, but also, we're back to the hand-wringing, ineffectual style of doing things. Even if you didn't like the decisions Roger Goodell made, he tried to be somewhat, or at least to my mind, consistent in, hey, you're hurting the shield, you're suspended, versus right now it's a wait and see game, and it's put a first-year coach in no man's land. And for all of us that cover the sport, trying to explain how and why things are happening, there's no rhyme or reason.
How do you think that whole saga ends for Watson?
He'll end up on the exempt list, I would suspect here, but not until, there's that 11th hour where he's forced to be. And then, because he's not going to be able to be deposed. We talked to our legal analyst on Fox Sports Radio. He's not going to be able to be deposed until February. You've got the summering of a grand jury investigation trying to indict him, and you get into a world where people say, oh, he's indicted. Well, that doesn't mean he's guilty, right? The old joke from Law and Order was that you can indict a ham sandwich. Not to be glib about it, but it doesn't necessarily end anything, and you still got to go through all of the women and the complaints and the details and try to decipher through, and the number of them that are now going out to their own press junkets and meeting with reporters. I don't know that helps any of the rest of the process to get to its whatever that natural conclusion is. So I think it drags on for quite some time here, and I said, for the last 2 years, Tyrod Taylor's probably led one of the most interesting existences in the National Football League. You lose a starting job on a pretty good-looking team because of a bad puncture job, and Justin Herbert takes over, when you're getting your pain shot. And then you go to Houston where you're expected to be the backup or, whatever happens in a Deshaun Watson trade scenario. And now you're taking reps while he's still on the field and everybody's trying to figure out which end is up. So you talk about a journey through an NFL life.
Yeah, and he, led the Bills to a playoff appearance. I thought that was a great story, even though he didn't have the best numbers. Was in Cleveland as well, didn't do well, then was replaced by Baker Mayfield. It seems like everywhere he goes, someone's always right in the back to replace him.
Yeah, it's a weird life that he's lived, right? Because with Buffalo, there were shades of this guy can play, but he's not going to be a stat monster, but he doesn't turn the ball over a ton. And then Cleveland, obviously, you get the opportunity to draft number one. You're done. I mean, that's it. Your career there is finished. So, and in Cleveland, you're usually a placeholder anyway.
Mike Harmon here on Sports Talk Chicago. Mike, let's talk White Sox now. How impressive were their trade deadline moves?
Right now, I'm loving what I'm seeing. Just at every part, function, execution. Watching the game on it while I was on air last night with Fox Sports Radio, I had to, I couldn't just start cheering. I mean, I see a bunt laid down, and I had a tear in my eye. But when Kimbrel comes in and he's firing and reaching 100 miles an hour, take what you will of the speedometer and the radar gun, but you know what? It hit triple digits. Let's celebrate it. When you get that 1-2 combination at the back of the pen, and you look at the lineup now healthy and ready to roll, it's fun times, right? It's the expectations of the world. I went out this weekend. My daughter had a soccer tournament and had a White Sox shirt on, and the guy looked at me and said, "Hey, good time to be a Sox fan." So like, it's always good time to be a Sox fan. What are you talking about? And he kind of looked at me like, "Why did you snap back at me?" I'm like, "Look, man, fandom isn't just when the team's winning, right? The team you follow is like you feel the lows, but yes, it's a fun year, highlights, and obviously all the attention around the Field of Dreams game. But when you finally are in a point where your team is being aggressive, not just, hey, we made a little bit of a move here or a little something there, but we go and raid the crosstown cupboard as they're having a sale. Right. And all of those, like, there's just a psychology that comes with it. So as a fan, as a guy that works nationally, and anybody that tells you they're not a fan of this, that, the other, again, they're liars. Because what got you into this field? Other than maybe you said, "Hey, I got a buddy that can get me a job. See how that all comes back, and I can make some money doing this." You're a fan of the game. You're a fan of the team or area that you grew up in. And for me, it's just been just thrilling to watch, this coalesce after everybody wanted Tony La Russa run out of town on the rails.
Did you want Tony La Russa run out of town?
No, I mean, obviously when the hiring happened and we talked about it, there was a little bit of, all right, this is an interesting move. Let's see how this plays. And decision making, right? People aren't used to, they lament that nobody manages like quote unquote old school. And yet they were quick to have the poison pens out as soon as he did.
Right. Exactly.
Right. So what you're doing in May sets up for what you're doing in September and October when it's winning time. So if you need to try to bunt to get a player over to generate a run in May and it doesn't work, now you're on the, you're being excoriated in the press. And then all of a sudden you start getting into August and September, and then those plays that you've integrated and made part of what your team's identity is work. It's like, oh, look, the genius of Tony La Russa. It's like, it's nothing the guy hadn't been doing. He was the bullpen guy 30 years ago, mixing and matching and doing all that. So I think it just took time for folks to appreciate it. But, as much as people want to celebrate guys as they get older in our sports and still thriving. I mean, look at all the rose petals finally thrown at Tom Brady. You got some holdouts, but for the most part, it's like, oh, look, at 43, he's still doing that. I think people, Tony La Russa, they weren't quite ready for that. And I'm not quite sure why. So, it's seeing him mix with this young squad and leading them as he has it's fun. It's a good story for baseball, right? The generations linking together, but also just from managing still matters.
How prepared are they for a World Series championship?
I think they are. I avoid the injuries down the stretch. I mean, obviously no cakewalk, plenty of boppers that you're going to have to field against and play. And I'm wondering if, you go back to 2005, you're going to be leaning on that rotation to come up big, right? Because the conga line of some of these big run outbursts aren't necessarily going to be there on a nightly basis. But, you've got the horses, and like we talked, you make a few moves to bolster the staff and the back end, and you should be ready to roll. So, no, well, I haven't booked a ticket. I mean, because I don't know dates yet. I do expect to be seeing baseball deep into October.
Are you going to come out to Chicago for a game if they make it to the World Series?
Oh, I'm already working with my brothers on that. Yeah. No, I got to game 2 back in 2005.
Okay.
And had to cancel all of my radio appearances. I was doing like hits all over the country doing fantasy stuff because I had no voice.
Well, what do you think they do this year? I mean, do you think really that they're going to win the World Series? I mean, who do they have to get past, and who do you think they face in this series itself?
Well, I picked the Brewers White Sox World Series pretty early in the season.
Okay.
So out here in Los Angeles, obviously, all the expectations, we're going again. It's like, that rotation is really shaky right now. And the guy that you just acquired, not quite a throw-in, but, well, let's call it a throw-in, in Trey Turner, the way that trade went down, he's your best position player right now. So, Bellinger's starting to hit again. Certainly the long balls are coming back, but they haven't had the same level of consistency. And you would think after all these deep playoff runs, even though they're younger guys, eventually it starts to catch up a little bit. But rotation-wise, I mean, we're not even going to get into the Trevor Bauer stuff, but he's not there. Kershaw's hurt. Dustin May's not there. So it's been on Julio Urias, who's been fantastic. And now you got Max Scherzer. So, nice to be able to go into the market and pick that up. But is that enough? I'm not sure. Milwaukee is, as you guys followed there in the Midwest, deep and look, you could beat up on the Cubs a lot, so that helps. But it's and that was not a slight to the Cubs. Okay, all right, it might have been, but it's the idea that
the AAA Cubs, Mike.
Well, but it's everything you do, John. You beat who's on the schedule, right? Folks could say that about the White Sox. Like, all you can do is play the games, refine things, figure out what's going to work, and then we see how it goes once you scale up and you're into the playoffs. And so I think it works. National League, there's a couple of teams that are interesting, but are they world beaters? No. Right, I think they're all. You got a number of teams that are the same on that side of the bracket, and through the American League, it's all right coming out of the East. What kind of power sensations? I mean, we saw how quickly things can change if the Yankees are hanging around, right? I don't know how a guy's still on a roster after saying I quit as a closer, but I'll leave those kind of decisions for people to answer that are smarter than me, but the decisions going through, I think they're well positioned to make a run. Pitching and big time hitting, it works. Plus the situational baseball, triple underscore that, all the stuff they've been working on all year.